The Yasadani Kalam Manyata, or Yasadani, it's saying in the singular, Yasadani Kalam Manyasi. It very often happens that the king, for example, might say, Jatasakti would say, for example, charioteer Sarati, yoke up my chariot because I want to go out into the forest. So the charioteer yokes up the chariot. And then he comes back to tell Ajatasattu, or whoever the king might be, that it's time to go now, king. But you can't quite do that. It's not quite polite. You can't say, king, come now, it's time. So it says, Yassa Dani Kalam Manyata. Yassa, of whatever, for whatever, Dani, now, Kalam, the time, Manyasi, you consider, you deem. It says, it is now the time for whatever you deem fit, Your Majesty. That's the signal for saying, please come to the chariot now, it's ready. It's said in a polite way. I'll write up this expression for you in case you ever have to use it. By the way, have I written the verb in the singular or the plural? The plural. The plural. If it were the singular, it would be C. This. So back to where we were. Last time we were looking at the Mangala Sutta, and we got as far as verse 11. These are venerable guests will know it all by heart, of course. But I'll just look at read through verse 11. And I might ask a couple of you to do it. I think we could have it I know we'll have it in my kind of English accent, and we can also have it in a little bit of a Welsh German accent.
Who's the Welsh? Who's the Welsh?
When I first heard you speaking, I thought you were Welsh.
My surname might be. No connection whatsoever. Jones.
Oh, right, that's right then.
Tapocha brahmacharyancha aryasachana dasanam nibbana sachikiriyacha etam mangalam uttamam. If you were a Thai, you always pronounce a n at the end, mangalam uttamam. In northern India, at the time of the Buddha, they would have said uttamam, but which is the Sanskrit pronunciation. Do it within whichever tradition and culture you have learned it. It honestly doesn't matter, and it doesn't make a difference. I have been told off, but only by Rachel Hall in a chanting class, for saying uttamam instead of uttamang. But that's just because I broke tradition rather than language rules there. So, tapo, Angela, you remember what root that comes from, don't you?
No, I don't remember anything. I had too long a break.
Tapo, it's actually from the root that. But for those who are new to the class, this is mathematical. Yes, mighty, welcome, mighty cloud, welcome to the class. This mathematical square root sign, I would say for those who are new, we use that to mean the dhatu, the root of the word. So the root is tap. So tap doesn't exist as a word on its own. It's called what in both Sanskrit and Pali is called the dhatu of the word. And this dhatu is a word meaning, it's a polysemic, it's got numerous meanings. It means the dhatu, it means an element, as in a chemical element. It also means a realm. And in the sense of a root, it's like an element, just as an element in chemistry is the simplest form into which something can be broken down or reduced. So the root of the word is the simplest form in which it can exist. That actually means heat, or to burn, and it makes one of its verbal nouns in Sanskrit is tapas, just as nam, to bow, namas, chit, chetas, and so on. Tap meaning to burn. But in Russian and the Slavonic language, tep and tyop, the words tyoply in Russian is hot. In fact, in Latin, it came to mean lukewarm, as in tepidus, tepid. Our word tepid actually is from that same root, but not tepid doesn't mean burning hot, it just means slightly warm, but it's from that same root. And it has the idea, the basic notion is heat, but the extended meaning is pain, bearing the pain. Willingly, the adhivasa of the dukkha is the bearing that tapas, which in Pali becomes tapo. Sanskrit tapasu tapaha, Pali tapo.
Isn't it in the Sanskrit with the austerities of the sadhus?
That is exactly that one.
Because that's what it refers to, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In this sense, the tapas.
Yeah. So in fact, in Sanskrit, let's go to red and green. Those who don't know, when I'm doing a comparison between Pali and Sanskrit, just so I don't have to explain every time I write the Sanskrit in red and the Pali in green. Somebody who does tapas is a tapasvin. It's this ending vin. And in Pali, tapasi, one who does tapas, it's the tapasvin, tapasi. So tapocha brahmacharyancha. Charya is from our root. You all know the root from charya, don't you?
It's not caritas, is it?
To char. The root char.
To go.
To go, yeah. Now, I've often said to people, looking at the root char, that if it looks like our modern English word car, it's because it is. No, seriously, it's from the same root. Char, charati, charamana. And we, through that, from that same word, we get carriage, chariot, all these words, cart, all these words are derivative from that same old root, char. And so a charya adding ya is one of the ways of making a verbal language, ya and so on. Charya becomes charya in Pali. Pali has the e there. So brahmacharya, Brahma is of course from the Hindu philosophy, Brahma, the ultimate Brahma. But like so many of these words, when the Bhagavad, when the Blessed One often use these Brahmanical terms, transposed them into his Dhamma Desana, his Dhamma teaching, and then gave them an entirely new meaning. So here, when he was talking about the brahmacharya, which means the living the holy life, he wasn't supporting and advocating belief in the Brahma, he was transposing the use of that word, meaning the real holy life. We get numerous instances where you get Brahmanical terms that are transposed into an entirely different meaning in the Pali teaching. One of my favorites is the word Upanayiko. Swakhato Bhagavata Dhammo. So please mime it again. Make that same gesture, please. It's right. Yes, you've got it. Now, it's this word actually is a very beautiful word. Is there anybody here who can really explain it in its Sanskrit and Brahmanical origin? So it's from the root ni. Ni meaning to lead. And from the root ni, we get words like Nayaka, meaning leader. And the former president of Sri Lanka was Bandaranayaka, which means the leader, the monkey leader, the leader of the monkeys, from the story of the Ramayana. It wasn't meant to be any kind of comment on what the Sri Lankans were like. It was the reference was the story from the Ramayana. So ni, and it makes a verbal noun naya. One of the verbal nouns. Naya is the act of leading. If you put upa in front of it, upanaya, this word upa, towards or up to, in fact, our English word up and the upa are the same word, etymologically the same word. They're from the same origin. Now, the upanaya was a Brahmanical ceremony, but when a boy was around the age of, I think, 13 or 14 or something, they had the ceremony of the upanaya, where the boy would be led up by the hand, led to his guru, and invested with the Brahmanical thread. It was rather like somewhat akin to the Christian ceremony of confirmation, or to the Jewish bar mitzvah, that's the upanaya, like a formal rite of passage for the Brahmanical boys. It was an initiation ceremony. Now, that was a purely ceremonial thing. When the Buddha then was giving his desana, his teachings, he said the real upanaya, the real initiation is hearing the Dhamma, understanding the Dhamma. Arya Satchanam Dasanam, seeing the noble truths, that is the real upanaya. And the reason it becomes upanayaka is a slightly complex story. I'll just give you a little bit. Where you have a noun ending in an a, you can turn it into an adjective by adding ika. But when you do that, you've got to strengthen this. First, in Sanskrit, you would do it with an aupanayika, and in Pali, sorry, Pali, aupanayika. So aupanayiko is simply the adjective form of upanaya. If you wanted a one-word translation of it, you could call it initiatory in the sense of relating to the ceremony of the initiation, but it's the leading up to, the leading into the higher life. That's what it means. As you so beautifully mimed, long thought, it's the leading. So brahmacharyancha. Oh, by the way, this I've given you the word charya. You also in Pali, it's less common, but it is charyam. You can have charya or charyam. So brahmacharya, brahmacharyan have the same meaning. Both are equally permissible in Pali. And then Arya Sakchana Dasanam. The Sakchana is the genitive plural. Normally it would be Sakchanam, Sakchanandasanam, but the final anuswara can often be dropped in poetry. Not in prose, it would not be dropped. In the suttas, you wouldn't see that happening. But in poetry, in the chants we do, in the Dhammapada, for example, you often see that the final M is dropped. It's of no grammatical significance. It's done purely for the poetical meter. It's to avoid the extra long Arya Sakchanandasanam. It's Sakchanadasanam. It just shortens the syllable, but it makes it laghu, whereas otherwise it would be garu. Laghu and garu. So a syllable here is either laghu or lahu, say both, or garu, light and heavy. So dasanam is garu laghu, garu dasanam. Laghu, you can also have lahu, both forms exist. Cognate with the Latin levis and the English light. Light is the opposite of heavy. And garu in Latin gravis, whereby we have gravity. So it's the word originally is heavy, and also by extension it means important, venerable. You know, garava means a sense of reverence. Sorry? Gravitas. So we have gravity, which is a physical phenomenon, something is heavy. And we have gravitas, person has gravitas, is garava. You have the sense of his anubhava around him, the sense of his dignity, and very much this is the weight, the gravitas around him. So the garava and gravitas changed slightly through the different languages, but they are essentially the same word. Incidentally, the word started life as garu, and in the Vedas you will see garu, but in later Sanskrit you will see guru. It's just the a switched to an u. So the guru actually is from the same word as gravis, the person you treat with weight and with gravity. The person to whom you offer your respect is your guru. There have been attempts, mostly on Indian Sanskrit scholars, to say garu. Guru means the dispeller of darkness, but you get lots of stories like that coming out, and it's just an ordinary word meaning heavy. So Arya Sakchana Dasanam, so Satcha, neuter noun, so Satcham in the neuter, Satchani in the plural, Satchanam genitive plural, and Dasanam simply means the seeing of something. This word dasanam, it means both a physical seeing and then of course the understanding it. So here of course it's the Arya Sakchana dasanam, means seeing and understanding and inward knowing of what these Arya Sakchani are.
Did we say what the Arya they were? The Arya?
Arya.
Did we say what they were?
I haven't explained.
All right.
Do you want me to? There is just so much in this little group. Let me do dasanam, and then we'll go to Arya. Arya is such a full word of so many ramifications. Dasanam, let's just look at dasanam for a moment. The root drish. That's the Vedic root drish. And it makes darshana in Sanskrit, written that in red. But as so often happens, you get a consonant cluster there, r and sh. So you make that into a double consonant instead. Like artha becomes atta. And also Pali doesn't have a sh, so it becomes a sa. But we get dasana. It's just been seeing. So far, is there from our venerable guests any challenge or comment to what I have said?
Yes, it is. Came to my mind that in Thai we use like the A or SA, like in the Thai scripture that for that draw we call it like the drasana.
You have different letters in the Thai. They're all pronounced as sa, but they represent the three different Sanskrit. I can't remember. I did study Thai script a long time ago. I can't remember it now. But in Sanskrit, you have that's an ordinary sa.
Yeah.
And then you have that, which is the palatal ch, as in vipashyana, and you have the retroflex, which is like a sh, corresponds to da, you have the da, sh, sh. Now in Thai, you have three different letters in the Thai script that correspond to those three, even though they're all pronounced as a sa. For example, we have in Sanskrit, we have the word bhasha, sorry, bhasha. Meaning language, and that in Sanskrit, in Devanagari rather, is written with this sh sound. So correctly in Sanskrit, it has bhasha. In Pali, it becomes bhasa. How do you pronounce it in Thai?
Phasa.
Phasa, right. But you spell it as if it were written with the old Sanskrit sh. So what has happened when we're writing Pali, we tend to just, when we're using the Roman script, I think in Sri Lanka as well, they just have one sa for all of them. Whereas the Thais, although they pronounce it all as a sa, like in Pali, they retain the old spelling from Sanskrit. It must be a little bit difficult, I think, for school children learning. It's all pronounced as a sa. Which sa do you use? You just have to remember as you go along. Incidentally, from this root drish is a little bit of an unusual verb because the present tense, you don't say darshami or drashami, you say in Sanskrit pashyami. In Pali, passami is just, there may be a couple of other verbs like that, but this is just one of those verbs. It's the most common of them that has a different past tense, a different root, and a different present tense. It's called a suppletive verb.
But in the Sanskrit, the darshan means to see the glimpse of God, or the God will look at you,
Exactly,
or you will
so.
look at the God.
Yeah, and you also have the Guru Darshan
That's
in
right.
Hindi. So where you would just have, the Guru will sit there, and the people will be around him, and they will all have darshan.
They will have
Yeah,
darshan.
they will have darshan of the Guru. In other words, just have the seeing of the Guru.
It's a different grammar, isn't it? Too?
Sorry?
It's different as just seeing.
Yeah.
It's have the seeing of
Oh, well, it's a bit like English and other languages. You can see something in the ordinary physical sense, and you can see something in the sense of a spiritual understanding, as we have it exactly here. Ariya Satchana Dasanam. This is the dasana, not a physical seeing, but a real understanding of the Ariya Satchana. By the way, from this root, from the present tense pashya, that's where we get vipassana, meaning vipashyana in Sanskrit means seeing into something. Now that I have the advantage of three venerable people here, I just want to test something. It might be interesting for you, for you all. It's the meaning of the word vihara. Okay, we talk about the Buddha Savatim viharati and so on. Viharati, to dwell, to stay. A vihara is a dwelling place. I'd be very interested to know from any of our honored guests from Thailand how that word vihara and the origin of it is explained.
It's been the place where we dwelling in, or where we reside in, like a vihara. Like we call in Thai vihan. Vihan is like the big place, or not just the place, but the like vihara in breathing, something like that. You focus in breathing, vihara dhamma.
Okay.
So you use your breathing as your dwelling.
The breathing is
Now,
Yeah.
I am going to give an explanation that agrees absolutely with what you have said, Wanpo, but actually hopefully analyzes it a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's from the root ri. The ri means to take, as in ahara, for example. So hara, the verbal noun is hara. Now, with the prefix a, it means like towards. So the ahara means taking towards yourself. An interesting fact, just to explain a bit of Thai to those. Very often, when a Pali or Sanskrit word is used in Thai, they will drop off the last syllable. Okay, so you get ahara. Okay. Now, what will often happen in Thai, they'll actually drop off the last syllable, ahar, but under the rules of Thai phonetics, if a word ends in a r, it's pronounced as a n. So the word is pronounced ahan. Sorry? Ahan.
Yes.
One day I'll get the tones right.
And
in modern Thai, it means food. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's food. Well, because what you take into yourselves, the ahara, the intaking of the food. Now, the prefix vi is what we call the separative prefix, means away, splitting. Vaya dhamma sankhara, vaya is vyaya, vaya dhamma sankhara, coming apart. If you vigata midho, means your midho, your drowsiness is vigata, gone away, you're rid of it.
Free from drowsiness.
So, sorry?
Free from drowsiness.
Free from drowsiness. If you vigata midho, you're free of, exactly so, free of drowsiness. Now, vihara on the face of it then looks like taking yourself apart. There you are. Your vihara, where you take yourself away from the street, from the marketplace, from a noisy vihara. You take yourself away into your private place. So that is the root meaning, as I understand it, of the vihara. So not only where you're dwelling, but where you can withdraw a bit, your own space, where you can be quiet and private. Are you agreeing with me, Long?
Yeah.
I'm so pleased. I was trying to work that word out. I'm so pleased that you've agreed with me. Incidentally,
So would anyone live in a vihara or only monks?
okay, anybody can viharati anywhere,
Okay.
but the word vihara as the name of a place is, I think, specifically used only for the. I mean, in Thai, for example, you say vihan. You said, is that used only for the monks?
Not really.
You could use, anybody can have his own
Yeah.
vihan. It means a kind of private residence.
Yes, and also for the very huge, like the palace or something, we use the word vihara as well. For
Also,
some palace,
okay,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Ah,
Or
okay.
Mahavihara.
So it'd be the Raja Vihan or
Yeah,
something.
Raja
Like that.
Vihara.
Okay, right. So the Vihara of the Raja.
The private place of the Raja, the king.
Right, yes, okay. I'm so pleased you've confirmed what I thought. Always a relief to have your theories confirmed. On this point, we spoke about Char. And we have the Achara, which we commonly translate into English as conduct. Your charas, your acharya, what you move yourself towards. So in other words, how you behave towards life, how you behave towards things, the acharya, your approach, your behavior towards things. And in Sanskrit, the acharya as in Shankaracharya, it's quite a common title among the Hindus for venerable teachers, the Acharya. And it means originally, so the Acharya is conduct. The Acharya means the person who teaches conduct, your guide for how to behave in life. So generally your teacher. And in Pali, can become Acharya, so rather than Acharya. What happens to that word in Thai? First of all, they drop off this last syllable, and in this case, it's two syllables. And they lengthen the R. What's the next rule? The final R becomes a N. And the next rule after that the unaspirated ch in Pali and Sanskrit actually becomes a j in Thai. So that's why Acharya turns up in Thai as Ajan. That's it. So when we call somebody an Ajan, that is simply the Thai pronunciation of the Pali Acharya from the Sanskrit Acharya, as in Shankaracharya. So when you call somebody Ajan, the Jan bit, the root of that, char, that's the same as our English word car. We can follow all sorts of little roots. You wanted me to talk about Arya. Okay. It's difficult to say which root, which dhatu of the Vedic Sanskrit Pali languages is the most fun and the most productive. You get so many words. But my vote at the moment would go to the root to go. A tiny, simple little word. Let me explain. Okay, Sanskrit has this, what we call the subdotted r, which is treated, by the way, in Sanskrit as a vowel, not a consonant. It could be sometimes, even the word Sanskrit, is that vowel. It drops in Pali and becomes another vowel. So, for example, the Sanskrit krita, meaning done, becomes kata, done. As in katang karaniyam, done is what had to be done. Katang karaniyam. Anyway, back to our root ri. It means to go. So far, so good, pretty simple. Now, let us take, for example, the addition of the suffix, nominalizing suffix ta to a word. That is one of the ways, one of the numerous ways that you make a noun from a verb. For example, we have kind of So you have sham, meaning to calm, which in Pali becomes sam, and you add on this nominalizing suffix, lo and behold, samatha. So the word samatha in Sanskrit, shamata, just means calming. That's the basic meaning of this root sham. And in Sanskrit, we all know the word shanti, om, shanti, shanti, shanti. It's that same word, the shanti. The M becomes an N before the T. That's normal. So shanti. So samatha. Now back to our root ri. If you, let's add to it the same suffix, ta. By a process of vowel mutation, I won't go into all that now, it's called the guna form, but strengthening the vowel. So you don't see rita, you say artha. Artha. So ready to go. The artha, the original meaning was going. And then by extension of meaning, what you are going to, your destination, your objective. And also in respect of words, the artha of a word is the meaning of a word. What's the word getting at? What's it aiming at? And karaniyam atta kusalena atta there in the meaning of the goal. And if something is anatta, not anatta, that's different. Anatta means without atta, it's useless, waste of time, even harmful. Anatta. So this artha, by the regular rules of mutation, this consonant cluster becomes in Pali atta. So this atta. Now we see original to go, but then the objective and the going, the destination, the meaning, and then something that's useful, beneficial, valuable. In fact, in modern Hindi, for example, the word for economics as a subject of study is arthashastra, the science of wealth. So artha also means wealth. And in Pali. Now, you can make a future passive participle in various ways. The future passive participle is something to be done, from karoti karaniyam, to be done. Sevitabba, to be followed or to be practiced. And the dhammo pachatang veditabbo vinuhi, veditabbo, to be known. Now, that's the ending with a tabba. You can also make a future passive participle just by adding ya. So, for example, you can make from kar, you can make kritya, meaning something that is to be done. Appakitcho of few things to be, so alpakritya in Sanskrit, apakritya in Pali, means having few, not constantly busy, not having too many tasks to be done. Some, but not to be overburdened with tasks. Now, from we can get Karya. Meaning to be done. And from Re, this is a slightly contentious, not everyone is going to agree with this, but for the moment I'm going to stand up and kind of fight for it until I'm told I'm wrong. From the root Re, you get Arya. Karya, Re Arya, which would mean to be gone to, means a desirable thing or place to be. The migrants, we're looking back now about to approximately 2000 BC, thereabouts, who came in from the southeastern, who took the southeastern route, so from Iran, Punjab down to the Ganges Valley. They call themselves the Aryas. That was their own name for themselves. The name has survived in two modern countries, one of which is, of course, Iran, which is that same route, the land of the Aryas. And the other, miraculously, is the native land of my fathers, which in Irish is called Éireann. So Éireann, Iran, and Arya are all from that same root. It means the desirable thing, that they regard themselves as rather superior.
The Irish.
Sorry?
In Ireland, Éireann, yeah.
Éireann, it's that same as Iran and Éireann, etymologically the same word.
And that's what the race, he called the race, sort of. The
Are we
area-
talking about it? Oops.
Yes. This is better than that.
Okay, my legal floor, yes.
Yeah. We're superior.
It's a long
Yeah,
way.
yes, there was that subtext to it. And I'm not talking about Nazi Germany. I thought that wasn't a subtext. That was open. They made no sense. At least they were honest about it. It was back in India in those times. They did regard themselves as being somewhat superior to the original races. And
I found that between the north and the south,
yeah,
the different races, sort of the lighter skinned ones in the north compared to the southern ones.
exactly.
They can be quite disparaging about them.
They can be very disparaging indeed. And one of in Sanskrit, varna, in Pali, varna, the original meaning is a covering and then a color, because the outer covering of something is its color, what you see. That's the varna in Pali, varna in Sanskrit. And that word is still used as one of the words for your caste. What caste are you? What varna are you? In other words, what color are you? So they were explicitly dividing people by color. The darker you were, the lower down you were. This will become much more mixed up, of course, but it was a lot less mixed up at the time of the Aryan mass migration. I was about to say Aryan invasion. The invasion theory has been disputed, but there was definitely a large Aryan migration.
Did the Aryans not subdue the indigenous people? Because in the Vedas it does kind of imply something like that sometimes, that they were sort of a conquering kind of.
It does, yeah. I mean, they were not only subduing the original peoples, but quite a lot of fighting in between themselves. The Vedas, the Rig Veda, it's not all beauty and love and spirituality. No, it's not like the teaching of the Buddha. There's a lot of raiding, fighting, battles, cattle raiding. It's sort of to raid other people's cattle.
Yeah.
So there's no kind of, Adinadana Veramani, no, you were allowed to raid cattle. Some pretty bloodthirsty stuff back in the Veda. Anyway, so that explains, so that is one explanation of Arya. So Arya in Sanskrit and Ariya, 3 short syllables in Pali. Arya, Sanskrit, Arya, Pali. And here's another case where the Buddha, we discussed, the Upanayika. The Arya is another case where the Buddha was saying that the real Arya is not the Arya by birth. The real Arya is the one who understands the Arya Satchani. So that yet another case where to be an Arya for the Buddha was nothing to do with your caste. It was to do with your level of spiritual understanding, your hearing of the Dhamma. And
Can I just ask you a question?
please do. Yes, please do.
What struck me, if you go to Spanish, the word go, it's around its ear.
Okay.
But then it's not used in declining the verb. It comes boy, bas, bambas, but it's, I don't know whether there's any.
No, there's
explanation.
in fact there is an even better connection there. I've got a better connection for it. The ear, by the way, it is used in conjugate, but in the future, ire, iras, ira, will go. Iria would go. So it's used for the future tenses, future and conditional. Now the Spanish ear comes from the same root as Sanskrit and Pali e. So the root e. Here we are. And this root e, it turns up in Latin, by the way, in the infinitive ire, ire to go. Third person singular, it, he, she, or it goes. It's just it. We use the word in English the whole time, but with an X in front of it. So X meaning out, it, he goes to exit. So this E here, it, okay, both in Sanskrit and Pali, is eti. It doesn't go anymore to a gambhasaya, literally to a resting place in a womb. In other words, he doesn't get to be born. This one makes the aya, which get, as we were discussing a bit earlier, vyaya, which vyaya in Sanskrit, vaya in Pali, as in vayadhamma vyaya, breaking apart, going apart, as in vayadhamma sankara. And you can so have a break for tea in a moment, but also this wonderful one, the E, and the absolutive form is itya, having gone, itya. It's the same with itya, having gone. And in Sanskrit, and if you put the prefix prati in front of it, it means literally to go, prati, to go against, like leaning against. And the absolute of having done it is pratitya in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, that means depending, leaning on something, relying on something. And the samutpada becomes also samutpada. You can have the in Sanskrit becomes a double P in Pali, samutpada. So you get pratitya samutpada becomes in Pali altogether now praticca samutpada. So the E in the Icha is that this root here. Praticca, leaning against, going against, in reliance on something. It's like a necessary condition for something else to exist. It's translated often as conditioned co-arising, but that doesn't quite get the whole of the meaning of praticca. Praticca means it relies on it for its existence. Without that first condition, the second condition could not exist. It relies on it for its existence. Oh, does anyone have the breakdown of why satya means truth?
We must have had it before.
We may have had it before. In fact, it's a bit of a slightly irregular verb, but don't worry about it being irregular, because it's irregular in Sanskrit, it's irregular in Pali, and in Latin, and in German, and in English, but it's all the same word. So we get to the root as, meaning to be. To make it is, give it my proper colors for this. Sanskrit, asti. Whenever you put a and a da together in Sanskrit, it almost always becomes an aspirated t in Pali. And if there's a vowel before it, it doubles. So atti, same meaning as hoti, bhavati means it is. And in asti, the Latin word to be in Latin is esse. As something is in Latin is est. Asti, est. German ist. English exactly the same, except we've lost the T at the end. So asti, atti, est, is are etymologically exactly the same word. Now, there is an irregularity in this word, because all is asti, in certain parts of the verb in Sanskrit, you drop off the first ha. So, for example, you don't say asanti, just santi. They are, which would be the same in Pali as well. Now we're going to make the present, that means they are. Now we're going to make the present participle, which is you make the base of the present participle. Just drop off the NT and just put it down. So it's the root form, not the root form, the stem form, sorry, I should say, but the present part, it means being. It also has, by extension, it means good, or excellent, or true. So we have the word like sat plus guru becomes the sadguru, the good guru. Sat plus dhamma becomes the saddhamma, the good law, the good dhamma. And in Sanskrit, we have the Saddharma Pundarika Sutra. The Pundarika is one of the numerous words for a lotus. So the Saddharma Pundarika Sutra, the Sutta in Pali, Sutra in Sanskrit, is the sutra of the lotus of the Saddharma. So Sanskrit, Saddharma, Pali, Saddhamma, the sutra of the lotus of the good law. Now, Sat, therefore, one of the meanings of Sat is true. And we can make an abstract noun out of it, that which is true. So that which is real or exists or true, really existing, is Satya. The logo of the Republic of India, Satyameva Jayate, which is the truth that will conquer. Satyameva, the truth alone will conquer. And Satya becomes in Pali Satya.
But really existing, is that?
That which
that's got-
really
That
exists.
goes to the original
Yeah.
word, doesn't it? Being,
Yeah.
so really existing is true, really existing.
And we
But
have
good,
this,
and good in it as well, so good.
it had the extended meaning. Originally, it just meant that which is, it is.
It
Then
is
by extended meanings, good and true.
true.
And for example, this word in the meaning of truly existing is the Sakkaya Ditti, which in Sanskrit would be the Sakkaya Drishti, in the view, the Drishti, from the word Drish we just looked at, Drishti in Sanskrit, Ditti in Pali. The Drishti, the Ditti, the view, that the Sakkaya, you really are your body. Sakkaya meaning the body.
Sat.
That you mean that the body really exists as a thing rather than as a process.
Rather than an idea.
That's right. Yeah. So there we are. Well, we've done quite a good analysis. I think every single word in this first line. And we've seen actually for most of these words. Like most of these words also you will be using in modern Thai. They have come into Thai. Also, most of these words, Trapo, Charya, Arya, Satya, have in the various roundabout ways that I've explained, by historical linguistics, we're using in English and even German. Yeah.
Does it refer to the four noble truths, or just noble truths then? The Arya?
Well, here, he hasn't actually put
Four.
the number, but he clearly is referring to the four, the Chattari, or Chattunnam in the generative plural. Is it time for a tea break?
Definitely.
Definitely. Good.
Would you like to see?
Yes, please. I could put it away. It's the usual
You want to turn it back on? Break on your recording.
Ooh. Yeah. So I'm just going to pause.
I hear it chanted. But, I don't know in depth.
As you said, on the sacred thread, Sarah, the real initiation is understanding the Dharma, the real.
The real Upanaya.
Yeah, and the Brahma, the Brahmacharya, that's the who's initiated, isn't it? One, the noble one following the higher path is not
The Brahmachari.
to be initiated.
Divine
by path,
fairy.
yeah, but it's the higher teaching. It's almost like, in a sense, it's like revolutionaries too, but the change of meaning from the Sanskrit to the Pali is quite significant sometimes.
It is quite significant. And there's also talk about the Brahmins with the ritual bathing in the Ganges, or whatever holy river.
Yeah.
And the Buddha would say, well, the true bathing is the bathing in the Dhamma, not the just immersing your body in the Ganges. Anyone can do that. But this is so there are so many of these Brahmanical terms that are given a new meaning by the Buddha. So we can do the second line then. Nibbana Satchikiriyacha.
It's the Kiriyacha, I want to know what that means.
Etam Mangalam Uttamam. So Kiriya, Kiriya, it's from the root we've just been doing, Kriya. So Kriya in Sanskrit, Kriya means action. By the way, in Sanskrit also it specifically means the ritual actions that you have to perform for your particular gods, for your household. Kriya.
Kriya.
You mustn't neglect your Kriya. In the first chapter.
But it's ritual actions.
So it originally just means doing.
Right.
And then by extension, if somebody says, if the father says, have you done your kriya today? It means, have they done their kind of ritual worshipping?
Okay.
See? And in the early part of the Bhagavad Gita, maybe before the battle, there's the great fear in Arjuna that if you start fighting your own kinsman, then you'll fail to perform the kriya. And that's regarded as a very, very serious thing, because if you don't propitiate your gods, then you are in trouble. I mean, real trouble then. So neglecting the kriya.
That's a duty, is it? A
The,
duty.
the actual word just means doing.
Doing.
But if you don't do it, serious consequences will follow. Like if you're Roman Catholic, not going to mass on Sunday.
Mortal
Quite
sin.
serious. So Nibbana Satchikiriyacha. Nibbana. Come on, please tell me you all know the root of that word. The root is, the dhatu, the root is just va, meaning it's a very ordinary word of the language, just means blowing. Va. And it makes a verbal noun, vana, which again is a very ordinary word, meaning blowing. It came into Latin as ventus, and into via that root is ventilate, just letting the air, letting the wind through it. The same word vana comes into English as wind, that which blows, vana, wind. The nir means out, the nirvana literally means blowing out. And originally it started off as a very ordinary physical word of the language, as you might blow out a candle, it would be deeper nirvana, blowing out the lamp. And it was by extension of meaning, it was the extinguishment of the defilement. So it's expressed as a negative thing, the blowing out of what is papaka, what is evil, negative, defiling within one, is the actual meaning of nibbana. But the nirvana, we got an avert in Sanskrit, which always becomes a double B in Pali, nirvana, nibbana. And the Sanskrit, for example, in Sanskrit, sarva, meaning all, becomes sabba in Pali. Like it's sabbe satta sukhita, may all beings be happy.
So this word, Kyria,
Kiriya just means doing or making here.
how does it relate to Nibbana Satcha, the truth of Nibbana?
Sachi doesn't mean truth here.
Oh?
No, it's be not misled. Satcha, double C, non-aspirated, double CA. This is Sachi, which I will explain. And it's a really beautiful, beautiful word. So many of them. We're not going to stop saying it's a beautiful word. Incidentally, sarva, the idea of, is an ordinary word meaning all. But it also, when it came into Latin, with a slight difference, salvus, the r changed to a l in Latin. That's all that happened. So salvus originally meant whole or complete, and by extension salvation, saving. So the salvus means it's entire, it's whole. When it came into Greek, as so often happened from Sanskrit to Greek, the S became an H and it lost the verse, so that became in Greek so hollow, holocaust, hologram, meaning everything. And when it came into English, it even got more mangled. All that was left was the A-double-L, but it's originally from this. Okay, I know it doesn't sound like it.
Word salad.
A word salad.
Yeah.
Some of them, yeah, you have to look quite hard to trace them through. But there is, I think you should all have seen the explanatory glossary that I have sent round. Not that I would expect you to read right through it, but there's reference beginning to the wonderful Julius Pokorny. Is Wörterbuch des Indo-Germanisches Sprache, the dictionary of Indo-Germanic, and he was a fantastic fellow. He lived got a Polish or Russian name, Pokorny, actually lived in Switzerland, and oddly enough, he actually specialized in the Celtic languages. So there we've got this Swiss German of Slavonic origin specializing in the Celtic languages. But he produced this magnificent etymological dictionary where he starts off with the Proto-Indo-European roots. Those of you who looked, and I hope some of you will in due course, at entries in the explanatory glossary, I give the references to Pokorny and a very brief summary, just in 2 or 3 lines mostly, tracing these words through. Anyway, back to where we were. So Nibbana, blowing out. Satchi Kiriya. Satchi means with one's own eyes. So, and Kiriya means making. So Satchi Kiriya means making it so that it is with your own eyes. In other words, direct realization, not hearing from someone else. In Sanskrit, it is sakshi. From the root, not the root, the word aksha. In Sanskrit, aksha meaning the eye.
Is that what it is then? The eye, that's what the word means.
The eye that sees aksha. And the a changed to an o into Latin. Oculus, ocular. Meaning the
I mean,
eye.
it's quite a powerful statement though,
Yeah.
isn't it? I mean, what it's trying to say. Seeing Nibbana with one's own eyes.
That's right, being a direct witness to it,
That's what it's saying, is it?
That's right. Being,
Seeing Nibbana.
so it's often translated direct realization, but it's even more punchy in the Pali. It says with your own eyes. So this aksha, oculum, and auf Deutsch Augen, it's the same word. When it came into English, we lost the g sound, so that's why we have the word eye. So again, it doesn't look like it. You might take a bit of convincing, but our English eye, the seeing eye, it comes from that same root as the German. Augen, aksha. And you can have aksha and akshi, both in Sanskrit, so akki in Pali. And we have the word, so the sakki in Pali is the aksha, becomes a sakki, somebody who is seeing with his own eyes, meaning a witness. In fact, even in modern Hindi, the word sakshi is used as the just an ordinary word for a witness. So this sakshi, in Pali then has 2 forms, sakhi and sakshi, both forms exist side by side. It has this subtext. You're seeing something with your own eyes as a witness. And there are 2 subtexts here. Firstly, it's the direct seeing for yourself, not being told about it. The other part of the subtext is like a pure witness to an event that's happening. You are not an actor in the events, you are a bystander seeing what's happening. So it is the direct seeing, but not being involved in the drama. It's the pure witnessing of what's happening.
But the other one is more like the knowing.
Yeah, and the sakya is more the witnessing. This is satchikiriyaya, is that in that form of the word, it's more used for the direct knowing. So with eye making, satchikiriya, making so that it is with your own eyes. So the nibbana satchikiriya means realizing it for yourself. It's the same kind of idea, but using different words. as the Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, and at the end is Pachattam, for oneself. Pachattam Vedittambo, to be known for oneself directly. Using different words, but effectively the same meaning. So Nibbana Satchipiriyacha, and the literally with eye making, okay, it comes in English translators direct realization of Nibbana. So before we move on, are there any comments or queries? I think it might be an idea to have a couple of recitations. Volunteer to recite the verse. You needn't chant it. Well, you've all chanted lots and lots of times, so we'll know both.
One thing I might have a go at is from what we know now about this text, without looking at the official translation, make our own translation of the meanings that we've learned.
Well, I mean, there is no such thing as an official.
I know, but it's printed.
Printed translation. I suppose you get some translations that are more authoritative than others. Of the modern translators of Pali, and Bhikkhu Bodhi remains my hero translator, and he's just so meticulously accurate. And the great advantage of Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations is that almost if he's done it deliberately, he follows the Pali very, very closely, even in his structuring of the English sentences, which makes it so useful for learners of the language. If you're stuck on the Pali, look at Bhikkhu Bodhi's rendering of it into English. Follow the sentence structure through.
Was he a Buddhist?
Oh, he's still living. Yeah, he's a Buddhist monk. He's an American Buddhist monk, and he's still doing strong in New York, I think. The Bhikkhu Bodhis. You can look him up. And here are these thick book translations published by Wisdom Publications. He's done about 5 or 6 so far. He hasn't done the Dika, there's still the Morris Walsh one. But he's done the Majjhima, Anguttara, Samyutta, Sutta Nipata. Is there a 4th one, a 5th one? I can't remember now.
It strikes me a bit like technical translations, because they are very, very specific to the type of industry you're in. The same word, whether it's an aircraft or in shipbuilding or in construction, the meaning of the word changes. So you can't just take a dictionary and say, it's this. You can't just sit down and translate the words. You have to have an understanding of the context.
Indeed you do.
Except Google Translate taking over.
On a limited way.
In fact, I do quite a lot of Arabic to English legal translation, and when I've seen the attempts that Google translation of the artificial translation, I won't be out of a job for a long time. It's just sometimes laughably inaccurate. You can see why it's doing that. It's just a complete failure to comprehend that exactly the point you're making. Words in a legal context have a very specific meaning. Rather like words used in ordinary language might have different meaning when used in medical speech. So they're highly specific meanings, and every doctor knows exactly what that's how they can communicate with each other. It's the same with law, the same with technical things. And Bhikkhu Bodhi is actually a little bit like that, mercifully, when he translates from Pali, because he's perfectly aware that these words are often given very technical meanings in Buddhism, and he's careful to have consistency of the vocabulary in that way. So it comes with my high recommendation. Does speak good. So, are we ready to move on to the next one? Is anyone clamoring to something? Okay, what we can do is, as we get to the end, then we can just chant up to where we've got. So, looking at 12. Kuttassa lokadhammehi chittam yassanakam pati asokam virajam khemam etam mangalam tamam. The syntax of the first line is slightly tricky. But for the next few minutes, my mission in life is to ensure that you see it with clarity exactly how this, on the face of it, slightly tricky sentence is constructed. So putta. Putta literally means touched. And you recognize the word puttaba, which is the touch in the sense of, one of the 6 senses, puttaba, which is touchable, tangible, literally. Puttaba. Let me explain the word. So this is the past participle, putta, and puttassa is the genitive form of him who is touched. So, of him who is touched by the lokadhammehi, by the affairs of the world. Let's just look at this putta. It might not be immediately apparent to you looking at sprish there, but that is the Sanskrit form. And I'll explain how it comes to putta. So you get sprish, sprishati, sprishati, and the past participle, sprishta. So past participle is regularly formed, entirely regular. You add a ta, just the ta to the root, but by regular sandhi, it always happens wherever you get a sh, this sh palatal sh, followed by a ta, they both become retroflex. So sprish ta becomes a sprishta. Exactly the same as drishti becomes a drishti, which gives us the ditti in Pali. So sprishati, in fact, there's also an alternative form which will be using a little relevance to it. Alternative form is sprishati. Now, in Pali, Pali does not have a s followed by a consonant. It becomes an aspirated, it becomes a p. So it's a sp, like skandha in Sanskrit becomes kandha in Pali, for example. And sthana in Sanskrit becomes thana in Pali, meaning a place or an occasion. So sprishati, you can't have a spa, so it becomes a p instead. Pali, everything changes here in Pali, but in a regular, orderly kind of way. So fear not too much. Sprishati, sp becomes p, the r becomes u, yeah. The sh becomes a s because Pali doesn't have a sh, and the rest is the same. So sprishati, pusati.
It just looks different, doesn't it?
And Sprishta, the same happens. And the shta, as always, becomes ta. As in drishti, Sanskrit, ditti, Pali meaning view, samaditi, right view. Now, bit of fun etymology here. You very often find that in other languages, in Latin as well, occasionally into the Germanic languages, in German and English, this sh very often turns up as a k. For example, the word ashva in Sanskrit meaning horse turns up in Latin as equus. The sh of nasha, meaning destruction or harm, becomes nasa in Pali. It retains the s in Greek, nosos, meaning, and nosology, which is the classification of illnesses. I think I'm right there. Classification of illnesses.
Yes, that's right.
Nosology.
Yep.
It's the same as the nasa. All these illnesses, vinasamentu. We try to get which it is. It is all these ill things. Vinasam entu. May they go to vinasa, to destruction. And this nash in Sanskrit, of course, turns up as nok in Latin, as in noxious, harmful. And if you are innocent, in nockens means you have done no wrong. In nockens, you have not caused knock, you have not caused harm. So, sprishati turns up in Latin as spergere, meaning to sprinkle. So what's happened is the sprish root means to touch in Sanskrit, but its specialized meaning in Latin is more aspergis me domine hisso quod mundabor, we used to chant with the means aspergere, to sprinkle. So meaning to touch with water, not to drench in water, but just to sprinkle with water. It got that specialized meaning. And incidentally, when you are casting aspersions, you are spattering somebody with mud from that same root. It's the same word. And springshati turns up in English as a sprinkle. So that is etymologically our same word, that not to drench in water, but as the imagery is just let the water touch it, sprinkle it. But back to Sanskrit and Pali, this now has the ordinary meaning of touching, and that's how, I don't think it's ever used to mean sprinkling in Sanskrit and Pali. It's always just the ordinary touching, as in the senses. And here, puttasa, the putta means touched, dhammalokehi, by the affairs of the world, by things of the world. I think it was you, Peter, who alerted me that this dhammaloka, in the plural, in the nominative lokehi, in the instrumental plural, is the worldly winds. Is it praise and blame, gain and loss, pain and pleasure, and the other pairs, aren't they?
Fame and infamy, four pairs. It was when I was in Thailand, and we went to a temple where it was actually a Nepalese temple. That's right, Nepalese temple, and the monk who was there was Nepalese. The head monk was Nepalese, but sorry, it was a Buddhist temple, Taoist temple, but the head monk was Nepalese, and they didn't have the means to make Buddha rupas in Nepal, where he was from. Again, that's right. So they were casting a rupa to take there. Anyway, there were a number of Nepalese monks, one of whom came and talked to me. I was sat there, came and chatted to me, and we got on the subject of one of my favourite subjects, which is the 8 worldly winds. And we saw that's from the, he said that's in the last verse of Mangala Sutta, he said. And I said, oh, we've been studying the Mangala Sutta. We're going to be studying the Mangala Sutta.
Ah, so he reckons that the Logadhame, he refers to those 8 worldly winds.
He was very sure that these Logadhame are the 8 worldly winds that are in the first chapter of that book, and in
Referred to in this book.
in that book at the beginning.
Ah.
And he was pretty sure. I've looked it up since. I did a Google search on this. And
What was the result?
that was those worldly winds, the 8 worldly winds.
Specifically referred to here in the Mangala Sutta. That's a very interesting point, because it's not something Bhikkhu Bodhi might just been praising, not something that he picked up. He just translated something like worldly matters, or something, which linguistically is a perfectly correct translation. It may be that he just missed the allusion there to the.
I think he used the word vicissitudes or something like that of life, and that was used. I've seen that word used elsewhere as well when referring to
The vicissitudes, the ups and downs.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So is
Worth
that,
Googling.
right, so that really makes sense what you said then, Peter. So he who's, if he's the person who is touched, Lokadhammehi, Dhammaya meaning the very broad phenomena, things, the things of the world. Let's translate this. You can translate Dhamma, such a wide word here, just to think things of the world, but let's say the vicissitudes or the worldly winds. So, Kampati, from the root kamp, same in Sanskrit and Pali, it means to tremble. So, Chittam na kampati, the chitta does not tremble. In other words, he remains steadfast, it doesn't move him. To exuberant joy or to the depths of sorrow. He's just nakampa, his mind isn't shaken from its steadiness. Chittam nakampa. Now, this, the yassa is the relative pronoun of whom. Of whom. Now, in Pali, you can just say of whom the mind does not tremble. In English, we'd have to say something like the person whose mind does not tremble. In Pali, you can just say of whom the mind does not tremble, and it means the person of whose, the person who's, of whom the mind does not tremble. So, yassa, it's chittam yassa, the mind of whom. Now, puttassa is also in the genitive singular, and that agrees with yassa. So yassa, of whom, puttassa dhammalokehi, touched or affected by these worldly dhammas, chittam nakampati, the mind does not tremble. This word kampati, you probably remember from the Buddha remained teaching, because his anukampa for the world, his sympathy for beings in samsara, is the anukampa. Kampa, trembling. Anu has the meaning of resonating in accordance with. So he trembled with dukkha, but resonating with beings in samsara, as the anukampa, the resonating trembling, in other words, the sympathetic trembling, translated as sympathy, but feeling with sympathy. So here, kampati, in the sense of, it has its physical meaning, but here the mind remains steadfast. We now have a series of adjectives, 3 adjectives in the second line. Asokam, virajam, khemam. These are all in the neuter singular, because they all agree with chittam. So he of whom, being touched by worldly affairs, the mind does not tremble. And now these 3 adjectives in the second line, they all are describing the mind. Asokam, virajam, khemam.
James, can I just ask a question? It might be perfectly obvious to everybody, but something that isn't obvious to me, and that is that when you talk about neuter, male and female, and the nouns, is it the case that the nouns that we're looking at here in Pali will be one of those genders, or do they change gender depending on context or whatever?
Okay, the vast majority of nouns will be just have their own gender. You know, they'll there are, and in Sanskrit there are a few nouns that can be, you know, split commonly between masculine and neuter. Normally, if something is feminine in gender, it'll be remain firm with that. But sometimes neuters and masculines flip a bit in Pali. For example, the Sanskrit word for a tree is vriksham, and it's a neuter noun, meaning a tree. The vriksha becomes rukha in Pali. We've got the rukha mulani, the roots of trees. And the Buddha said, atta rukha mulani siddhata. There are the roots of trees sit. Now, you will find that in Pali, rukha, meaning a tree, can equally be masculine or neuter, which Sanskrit wouldn't allow, and Sanskrit is always neuter. Whereas Pali is a bit more fluid in.
Was the
I
same
hate to use the
meaning?
word gender fluid. What I mean is the grammatical genders of nouns tend to be, you know, flip between neuter and masculine. For example, Dhamma is another one. Dhamma is always masculine in Sanskrit. It's mostly masculine in Pali. But in the future, you will see, sorry, in the plural, you will occasionally see it with its neuter plural ending, dhammani. You'd expect to see dhamma, via dhamma. No, that's a different, there's uses actually, but the dhamma, loka dhamma, the affairs of the world, but you can see loka dhammani as well. There aren't too many of them, just be alert if you're puzzled.
So when it changes gender, it still has the same meaning.
Yeah, there are some words that will have a different meaning, whether it's masculine or neuter or feminine. But you and there just the dictionary will tell you what they are. But there are some words, as I said, that in Sanskrit, very much more orderly in Sanskrit. The masculine noun, it's a neuter noun, but in Pali they tend to flip.
Because in German there are nouns that change gender and they have a different meaning.
Indeed, so yeah. That does happen also in. I wish
I can't think of
I can't think of an example, but you do have that same phenomenon in Sanskrit that you do in German as well. The same, on the face of it, the same word, but masculine or neuter. As I said, words that are feminine tend to be much more orderly.
And you just go down another rabbit hole as well, and that is how on earth were words decided to be masculine, neuter, feminine? Because when I was learning German, it was very difficult to decide. And now in French, whether it's, I mean, is there a
And how on earth is a girl neuter in German?
Das Mädchen. Oh, that rule is easy enough.
Why is the moon?
All words ending in a shin, the diminutives ending in shin or line, they're all neuter, aren't they?
Yes.
But Frida, yeah, it's how goodness me, that's lost in the mist. Because already the earliest record we have, apart from Hittite, which I'm not conversant with at all, not even sure if they must have genders. Anyway, leaving aside Hittite, the earliest language for which we have, a solid, reliable written record is Vedic, going back to a well-dated, approximately 1800 BC, and that we have a very exact, authentic written record. And already in Vedic, the genders of nouns have become established. You can then go back to the Proto-Indo-European roots, but then you can reconstruct Proto-Indo-European roots but you can't reconstruct what genders were. So sadly, once you go back to pre-Vedic, you can't get pre-Vedic. You can just try and reconstruct it as we're reverse engineering the language. But how these genders came to be are lost. I mean, why is a table feminine in French? And das Tisch,
Der Tisch.
Der Tisch, okay. So with der Tisch, it's masculine in German, but feminine. The French first concept comes from that really doesn't solve because you've got to go back to Latin. Tabula is lata, tabula is a board. Is feminine in Latin. How did it get there?
But it still happens today, because in German, when a new word is imported, it's normally feminine. So party, telephone, but telephone, so I don't know, well, maybe 100 years ago the word started, and now it's neuter. But it's still D-party.
D-party, feminine.
Yes. The word, well, when I grew up initially, we didn't go to a party, we went to a fete. Is it defeated?
It should have been defeated because it's festa in Latin. Same like in fiesta.
There is no reason, in the original language, it was a certain gender, it would be the same one.
It's very hard to work out, isn't it?
So for the answer to the entertaining question, it's still a great puzzle for etymologists. But so I say you can trace back, make a very good go of reconstructing the Proto-Indo-European root. The way that's done is you look at what, say, something was in Vedic and how it's become in the later languages derived from Vedic. You can look at the Slavonic languages, go back as early as you can in Slavonic languages, as early as you can in the Germanic languages. Of course, we've got Greek and Latin. So you will see words that are very similar, but before a certain point, you've lost the thread of the actual historical record. But what you then do is you trace how these words have altered in sound in the later centuries through the various languages. Then you follow that process in reverse. And sometimes miraculously, they will all converge on something, on a certain route. So we've got a reasonable degree of certainty as to what most of these routes were. But that's a matter of reconstruction where we don't have the historical record, alas, that will tell us what the genders were or how the verbs were declined or something like that.
What has always puzzled me, the word moon, or Mond in German. In English, it's got the connotation made generally in the poetic form, the moon she.
Yes.
Well, in German, it's definitely masculine.
And die Sonne, and the sun is feminine. And in Latin, of course, sol is masculine and luna is feminine. And throughout the Latin languages, oddly enough, Arabic, Shams is feminine, the sun is feminine, because Al-Qamar, the moon, is masculine. So Arabic does what German does, which is a departure from the popular conception of the fiery masculine sun and the feminine moon. Why are Germans gender benders?
Definitely feminine energetically, the moon.
We could go on this one.
The moon is cold.
It's yin energy.
Okay, so we've come to, it's gone 9. Does anyone feel like should do a chant of it up to the point we've reached?
Yeah.
Happy with that?
Okay.
Your best.
Yeah,
I'm
okay, yeah,
here.
yeah, okay. Francis, would you lead us?
Yeah, sure. It's in, so we're going to start with Bahu or from the start.
Just jump into Bahu Deva.
Yeah.
I haven't actually got the other text.
Right, okay. Bahu Deva Manusa Chamangalani Achintayam Akam Dhamana Sotana Rui Mangala Mudamanga Sevana Chapalana Panditanam Cha Sevana Puja Cha Pujaneyana Edam Mangalam Uttamam Bhatirupade Savaso Chapumbe Chakatapunyata Atta Samma Panidi Chaetam Mangalam Uttamam Bahu Satyam Chasipam Nayo Chasusikito Subhasita Chayavacha Edam Mangalam Uttamam Mata Pitu Patana Buddhadarasa Sangaho Anapuna Chakamanta Edam Mangalam Uttamam Danam Chadamacharya Chanyatakana Chasangaho Anavanjani Kammani Etam Mangalamutama Arati Virati Papa Majapana Jasanyamo Pamadu Chadamme Suedam Mangalamuttamangaro Chanivato Chasanto Ki Chakatanyuta Kalena Dhamma Savanam Etam Mangalamuttamang Kanti Chaso Vachasata Samananam Chadasanam Kalena Dhamma Sagacha Etam Mangalamuttamam Tapo cha brahmacharyan cha arya satchana dasanam nibbana satchikiriya cha etam mangalamuttamam buddhassa logadhamme Jittam yasanakam bhatiya sokam virajam kema Edam mangalamuttamang etadisani kattvana sambattamaparajita sambatta suddhingachanti te sammangalamuttamang Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So it looks like next time we should, once we finish the last verse,
Right.
move on to the Ratana Sutta.
Very good. Very good.
Maybe I'll give me a terminals.
Francis, will you be here tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yes.
Because it might be a good idea then if we could have a chat about
Yes, homework.
external Pali, if you're feeling.
Okay, yes.
I'll leave it entirely to you.
Yes, okay, let's see how it works out. Yes, I'll be here for the morning one and maybe for the evening one.
Okay, I'll definitely be here for the morning one.
Okay.
Possibly we could.
Yeah, okay,
touch
fine.
base on
Yeah,
that.
yeah, okay, right, very good.
Finish my half. I said, I told people half 11 till work.
I think it's not very.
Well, I think
Turn this off now.
anything in the extra hour.
So-